Hey, Pastor Ray Barnett here with you. Glad that you could be with me here on Time for Truth, our Wednesday Bible study. And just to make mention, I know some of you who have noticed what used to be a 7 p.m. time, which was a couple of months worth of that. I have pushed the time up a little bit to right around this time, which is 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the United States. But I do my best to always have it on Wednesday, one way or the other. And like I always tell you, it's these teachings are up for 30 days, and Facebook doesn't take them down until after a month. So you can watch them here, live, obviously. You can watch them after we've recorded them, or you could always go over to YouTube, just put in my name, Pastor Ray Barnett, Time for Truth. Come right to our YouTube channel. And by the way, because I've been pushing the Oasis, we have two channels. The Oasis was about 3 years worth of studies, teachings that I did on anxiety and depression. So if that is a problem for you, there's, I don't know, forget how many videos, I think around 400 or so. So I did one a week for a few years. So anyway, that's there too. So we have a lot of ground to cover here today. Quite frankly, I don't know how much of it I can actually get through with you today. Oh, and by the way, just one thing. I'm sitting here in one of our side rooms in the house, and below me is the basement, and I have two plumbers down there repairing or actually installing a brand new water heater which went. So if there's a little noise coming up from below, it's not hell. It's just these two plumbers. All right, we'll see how it goes. Let's talk today about the return of Christ. Again, these broadcasts, these teachings are designed for those of you who are not very biblically literate. And one of the interesting things about Christianity is that there's many people that identify with Christ, with Christianity, but know nothing of the Bible because the church they attend doesn't teach it in some cases. You know, little short readings and it's part of a service. For others, it's kind of selective about what texts you hear, you know, and all that. Anyway, these are designed to be just fundamental, elementary teachings and to help you learn the Bible. And then, of course, those of you who do know the Bible, you can be refreshed or maybe hear something you haven't heard before or thought of before. So, the return of Christ. You know, and I preached on this Sunday, so if you'd like to go back and watch that whole message, there was a lot of statistics that I gave about how close are we to the return of Christ. And I won't be going through them today because I try to keep these broadcasts extremely simple. However, you can go right here on my profile page or back over to YouTube, and you can watch that message if you like, because there's a lot of statistical evidence I gave with some of the verses that I'm going to read today. How close are we to the return of Christ? And one of the interesting things, now let me explain this to you. Bible prophecy, when we use the term Bible prophecy, it's a very broad term. So Bible prophecy covers all types of subjects, you know, which it could be an individual, nations, the nation of Israel. And most of the prophecies of the Bible have been fulfilled already. So when we talk about Bible prophecy, there's a subcategory called eschatology, which we've covered this before. And when we're talking about eschatology, we're talking about the study of last things, which obviously have not been fulfilled. So that's the subject that we're on now. And with that in mind, on the subject of Bible prophecy, specifically eschatology, we come to the subject of the return of Christ. And we learn from studying the Bible on this subject of messianic prophecies, prophecies about the Messiah. And there's, well, hundreds and hundreds. We learn that for every one prophecy about Jesus coming, which we now know is first time in the return of Christ, for every one prophecy about Jesus' first advent, there's 8 prophecies that talk about his second coming, which obviously hasn't occurred yet. Interesting that the Bible places, and I'm not going to say more emphasis, I'm just going to simply say an equal emphasis, even though it's an 8-to-1 ratio, on his return. And the reason I think that there's more verses talking about the return of Christ is because that's when everything is finished here on earth. God's plan is finished, which we read way back beginning in the book of Genesis, in with Genesis chapter 3, when man sins and falls. So from last 6,000 years, God has had a plan, and his plan is being fulfilled every day, all the time. And ultimately, Christ, who has come, will come. He will return. And I won't be going into all the details of that, what the second coming of Christ entails. But just putting it again simply, when Christ returns, generally speaking, there will be the end of time, as we know it. And thankfully, there will be the end of a lot of things. All the thefts, murders, the adulteries, the not being able to trust man, and what else could you say? Lies and everything else. You know, it's all coming to an end. That's God's plan. Now, just so we're clear, between God initially establishing a covenant and a plan in Genesis 3, until we get to the book of the Revelation, and again, these are just general designations, we have God bringing redemption to man. So we call this, the Bible calls it salvation. So we talk about Christians, and I use the term real Christians, being saved. So we've talked about this before. There's only 2 destinations according to the Bible after death. One is heaven, one is hell. And again, the Bible does not say, God's book does not say everybody goes to heaven. Right? It doesn't say that. It says you must be born again, John 3:3, or saved, redeemed. And then we talk about other almost subcategories, but it's all the same thing: sanctification and justification and mercy and all that. So that's the plan. That's the part of the plan that's going on right now, is that God is inviting you, inviting me, well, I accepted that a long time ago, to be saved from the wrath to come. Read through the book, if you haven't, read through the book of the Revelation. Not an easy book to read, but you'll see what's coming. Now the question is, how soon? Well, let me just register an opinion here. I think some teachers of the subject of eschatology, which we just simply call them Bible prophecy teachers, I think that some maybe in their earnestness and also to communicate and to get across, this truth, they have a tendency to go too far. Those are the ones that are honest, not the ones that are dishonest. And in other words, they start to name dates and they start to pull the scriptures all over the place, and you're just sitting there kind of scratching your head trying to figure out how this all works. And then they land on some date or some whatever. And it's so simple. First of all, that's always been a mistake for anybody who's ever done it, ever. Even the best teachers that have fallen into that temptation were wrong. And then if others are doing it now, I don't know, I don't check so much anymore, it's still wrong. So I'll give them some benefit of the doubt that, they're trying to do it because their motives are pure and they really believe that, they know the date. Well, Jesus said no man knows the hour. But the Father, that's a little complicated to explain, the relationship between Father, Son, Holy Spirit, so that's not our subject, triunity of God. But Jesus said only the Father knows, that even the angels in heaven don't know the specific time, the specific date of the return of Christ, the return of Jesus. But now, I don't know, trying to think of something that would fit what we're about to read. Something that would fit is, well, you know what? I told you I have 2 plumbers down below here in the basement. And their policy in the company is that when they're getting close to the house, they send a text, make a call and send a text. So I look on my phone and there's a message. Roger is 5 minutes away from your house. And then there's 2 plumbers there. Nicholas is 15 minutes away from your house. Now they're at my house, so they have arrived for the first time. But again, if it's not the best example, just one that comes right to my mind. So in this company, they send a text, and it becomes, for what I want to convey to you, it becomes a sign. Within the next 5 minutes, next 15 minutes, you can expect the plumbers to come. All right? Well, Jesus, in the Bible, was asked, what would be the signs? When can we expect you to return? And he goes through a number of things, and I'm going to be in Luke chapter 21 if you want to start turning there. In Matthew chapter 24, this chapter here is Luke chapter 21, and then Mark records it also in chapter 13. Jesus gives signs, similar to my example of these guys, these workers, these plumbers, sending a text message. We'll be there 5 minutes, 15 minutes. Jesus is asked, and he says, these are the things to look for. So let's go through this. And I think I'm going to start at verse 5. So I'm going to read through this. We won't be able to cover all of it in the study today, but Jesus is at the temple before it was destroyed. And he's asked, if you read Matthew 24, he's asked, what would be the signs of your coming, of your return, and also of the end of the world? Right? And always remember, in case you're watching for the first time, there's a difference between the end of the world and the end of the earth. The Bible states the earth will always be. It will not be. The earth is not going to be destroyed. The planet is not going to be destroyed. The world is used primarily as an example of its system, its way of doing business, its goals of life. It's going to be done. It's going to be done away. So in verse 5, we're in Luke chapter 21, and we read, the Bible says, and some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts. He said, as for these things which ye behold, the days will come in the which there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Now, the temple, this temple here was destroyed in 70 A.D. by General Titus, who eventually became Caesar. And I'll just throw this in so I don't forget that we do expect that the temple will be rebuilt, because it would have to fulfill these prophecies we're about to read, that it will be rebuilt in Israel. I mean, this whole thing is just so interesting. Now, there is no temple there now. You have the Western Wall, but the temple's still been destroyed. And yet, periodically at least, we know that the Jews, and maybe a specific group more than everybody, but the Jews expect to rebuild the temple. So it's not like we're just reading it from the book and everybody else saying, what you can't talk about that. We don't expect it. They do expect to rebuild the temple. They have been preparing for many, many years for the Levitical priesthood, which we read in the Old Testament, the sacrifice of the red heifer that would cleanse the temple, and all the things you read in the Old Testament that would have to be to make this contemporary, and not, as some people interpret this chapter and chapter 24 of Matthew and 13 of Mark, as having already passed, because the temple was destroyed, as Jesus mentions. But again, I won't try to complicate it too much for you. The temple has to be rebuilt for what we're about to read, to accommodate the return of Christ. All right, so in verse 6, he talks about the temple being destroyed. As I said, it was in 70 A.D., but it will be rebuilt again. And that's not just from the Bible. You can read from people who don't, like Jewish people, who don't believe in our New Testament at all. They are prepared to build the temple again. So let's keep that in mind. All right, verse 7. I'm in Luke 21. They asked him, saying, Master, but when shall these things be? And what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? What sign? All right, that's with the example that I gave you about the plumbing company sending me text messages when these workers are coming and they're going to be here. What was the sign? If I was to talk to the plumbing company, they said, well, we'll give you a call and we'll send a text message, which they did. Now, Jesus gives us signs. He says, when you see these signs, my return is getting close. Look at verse 8, if you have your Bible open to Luke 21. And he said, take heed that ye be not deceived. The first thing that Jesus talks about, and we read it in Matthew 24 as well, is deception. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ. And the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them. But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified. For these things must first come to pass. But the end is not by and by. So the end is not going to be immediate. Then said he unto them, nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Understanding, as you should know, but again, if you don't, the New Testament was written in Greek, and a certain dialect of Greek, commonly known, or I should say more widely known as Koine Greek, common Greek. But it's also known as Biblical Greek, that some say that God used a certain type of Greek language that was unique to the Bible, which wouldn't surprise us because the book's been written by God through men, right? We've gone through that dozens of times already. But when you hear, I'm at verse 9, but when you hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass. But the end is not by and by. Then he said unto them, nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. So kingdom against kingdom would be country against country for us. Nation against nation, we have the Greek word, and I didn't study the Greek text under Luke, but I know for certain it's in Matthew, is the Greek word ethnos. where we get our word ethnic. One ethnic group going against another ethnic group. In other words, it could be within one country itself, which we have it here in America. It's all over the world, all over the world. South Korea, North Korea, even Ireland. You have Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, and even though they're all Irish, the Koreans are all Koreans, you have different ethnicities, philosophies fighting each other. Then, like in many countries now, as different ethnic groups have come in through either immigration or illegal immigration, we're having disruptions, and we're seeing this thing starting to really speed up. So, verse 11, and great earthquakes shall be in divers places. Divers is an old English word which means just various places. And famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. Now, I would like to again refer you back to my message from Sunday, which at the moment is pinned to the top of this profile page, but when I'm done with this study, this will be pinned. So you could just scroll down if you're interested, or go over to YouTube. And I gave all of the statistics. Again, I'm not going to go through all of those today. But let me break them apart for you. I mean, most of you can understand ethnic group against ethnic group. Look at even the continent of Africa, even within their various countries. You have one group from that nation or from that kingdom, from that country, killing off other people, and that's been around for a long, long time. And it's going on all over the world. Again, including here in the United States. Earthquakes. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, earthquakes are on the increase. We are able now to record them more so than any time in history, record them more accurately, but they are on the increase. These are all statistics I read, so you may want to go watch that message. It's an hour message, just like this Bible study is an hour Bible study. And go through listen to the statistics that I went through. But anyway, the U.S. Geological Society is saying, yes, there is an increase in earthquakes in certain areas, when Jesus said in various places. Famines are on the rise, and mostly, well, the disease as well, from these wars that are taking place. I forgot to mention that wars, Luke here has wars and commotions. Matthew records wars and rumors of wars, which, who doesn't know that today? And so we have famines. They are on the increase. All these statistics I gave in my message from Sunday. Pestilences, which is diseases, they are on the increase. And one thing I want to just say for those, I have many friends here who are pastors, who are teachers of the Bible, missionaries, whatever, and you're going to hear from time to time, as we do, well, there's always been wars, there's always been famines, and there's always been earthquakes. It's true. But what there hasn't been in the time in which we live, ever, is 8 billion people. Well, at least as far as we know. There may have been a population that big during the days of Noah's flood, but different subject. 8 billion people, and for certain, there hasn't been the technology we have now. It is just, I'll use the expression that we boomers use, it's blowing everybody's mind. I mean, it's blowing the minds of the people who create the artificial intelligence, the technology. Some of you know Elon Musk has created I'll call it a supercomputer, Grok, and now it's Grok 4, which has the equivalent of 200,000 CPUs in it. And if you put all the PhDs together in the world, of all different disciplines and fields, it's smarter than them all, because it's got 200,000 CPUs and can do calculations almost at the speed of light, and you get the idea. That we have not always had. So the answer, even if you're watching, you're saying, well, hey, we've always had wars, we've always had famines, we've always had pestilences, but we haven't always had the technology we have now, and perhaps as well the population. So we have those two alone are unique to our age. And all of these things, for instance, if you read the 12th chapter of Daniel, which is the last chapter of Daniel, Daniel is told to seal up the books, or the book, until the time of the end. And then, people would understand. He said the wise, they will understand. The godly will understand. The ungodly will not understand. And he said that men shall go to and fro, right, back and forth, which airplanes. You could even go to railroads and cars that haven't always been around. But everything is just going forth in the plan of God. Well, to talk about rocket ships too. Landing on the moon. Daniel is told to seal up the prophecies until the time of the end, and men will go to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. So we know more now, just in my generation alone. We grew up, us boomers, born right after the Second World War, when the economy boomed and a lot of things were booming, including births. So we're called baby boomers or boomers. Our life has been one of constant change. Once you get used to one thing, boom, there was something else. Got used to that, boom, it changed again. And now we're having that with technology. But most of us are used to the fact that things are always changing all the time. So we have definitely a unique situation in the times in which we live. And those two things would be population and technology. But we are reading in our media, or seeing in our media, or listening in our media, to the rise of nations, ethnic group against ethnic group, country against country, kingdom against kingdom. We're reading of the increase of earthquakes in various places, different places, and that's what the U.S. Geological Survey or Society has said. Rise of famines, the rise of pestilences. I'm in verse 11, Luke 21, if you're just joining. Fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. I gave a quote from one of the world's leading astrophysicists, Avi Loeb, the Israeli-born American professor. He was the chairman of the astrophysics department in Harvard. So this is not like, people who others say are on the lunatic fringe. But because someone says they're on the lunatic fringe does not mean that they are. Sometimes some of the greatest discoveries in life, by the way, have been made by people who aren't in that field. Well, I can go through some things, but just take my word for it. It wasn't always the experts that discovered things. It was just people who took an interest in something to actually study it. 100 Uses for the Peanut by George Washington Carver. Things like that. So we live in a unique time, and we're seeing these things increase. And Avi Loeb is on record. I actually have a couple of his books, which I've read. And he is saying we need to really get in touch. I read it from the New York Post just about 10 weeks ago. They had this article from Avi Loeb, or about Avi Loeb, saying that we're going to be in touch with extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, I'm not going to go down that road, other than to say the Bible does talk about what I would call extraterrestrial, angels and demons. Not to mention, of course, God himself, but if we just take the Creator and give him the respect that he deserves, extraterrestrial, something beyond our earth, is found in the Bible constantly, from the very beginning, in demons and in angels. Avi Loeb, Professor Emeritus of Harvard University, is talking about this. You can read it, Google it, you can read it for yourself. August the 10th, 2025, in the New York Post. He's saying we better get prepared to be contacted by alien intelligence, and we better get our act together real soon. And that's only 10 weeks ago. So we're seeing, what I'm trying to say is that, like the signs I gave you with the text messages, we're seeing the signs in this generation like no other generation. For those of you who have studied theology, or just some of you are in the know about what I'm about to say, there have always been Christian teachers and preachers and leaders that were expecting Jesus to return in their time. And that's actually proper. Of course, didn't happen. But they didn't have the evidence that we have. They just didn't have it. It was just purely an act of faith on what Christ has taught, the apostles have taught, the prophets of the Old Testament have taught. We have an abundance of evidence, a preponderance of evidence that the return of Christ is very close. Now, again, I'm not going to name a date. I'm not going to say it's definitely going to happen in my lifetime, because I don't know that. But I do certainly think about the fact that it's possible Jesus could return in my lifetime. Or my children, who obviously are much younger, and my grandchildren, who are much, much younger. How close? Well, we can't say, with specifically, but we can say it's getting very, very close. Jesus said this, "And if I go away," which he did, right? Read the first chapter of Acts, the ascension of Christ. He said, "I will come again." And so we have this expectancy. Read Isaiah 61, verse 2. Jesus only reads half that verse. And I'm going to read that. We're going to see it again here in Luke 21. Jesus reads half of that verse, but stops in the middle of the verse when he talks about the acceptable year of the Lord. And then he stops right there. But the rest of the verse says, "And the day of vengeance of our God." When God is going to take everyone who has refused his offer of mercy and refused his offer of grace and so on, to be held accountable for every word, every deed, everything. All right, let's move on. Verse 12, "But before all this, the church has suffered persecution over its 2,000 years history, but it's also around the world suffering persecution now." And let me add this too, while it's in my mind. Christianity is actually increasing in Africa, the whole continent, South America, Central America, around the world. But it is declining and decreasing in cultures like ours. We're seeing a decline in biblical Christianity. We're not seeing so much of a decline of people just going back and forth to church, even though, again, if you're an observant person here in America, you've seen, for instance, the Catholic Church. They've closed so many churches. In this city, the city I grew up in, Yonkers, we see not a good sign for us. But yet around the world, Christianity is definitely increasing. So that's a fulfillment of Matthew 24:14, and also just various prophecies of the Bible that Christ would be preached to the whole world. That's Matthew 24:14. And then the end would come. And Christ is being preached all over the world right now. Right now. From someone like me, sitting in a chair in some remote location. Believe me, in some remote location on the globe, and to people like you who are watching, and this is happening all over the place. Why? Because the time is getting very, very close. So let me ask you this, while I'm on that thought, are you really prepared to meet Jesus? I mean, not because some tradition tells you, it's not going to be a big deal, That's not what this book says. The book says that when Christ appears, people will be crying out for the mountains and the rocks to hide them. Now, how can that be? When we read Jesus in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, preached in Acts and so on, we see, the humble, meek carpenter. That's because we are in what's known as the age of grace. But it won't always be that way. The day will come when that will just be done. That's done. Now you're held accountable for your own actions, your own sins, and so on. And there's no way you could pay for them by, your alone. So this is the balance of the Bible. We could say good news and bad news. If you know the bad news, then receiving Christ is good news. But my question to you at the moment is, if you are a professing Christian, if I was to ask you, you had to fill out something on an application or something, and it said there, religion, which I'm not sure they ask that question too much anymore, but some places do, and you put down Christian, or you put down maybe your specific denomination, how do you back that up without knowing this Bible and what it says, or being in submission to what Christ has talked about? So we have these things happening in Luke 21. I read to you verse 9, verse 10, verse 11. Now verse 12, but before all these they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, which has happened, but it's also happening now. Now some of you who have contacted me, and I don't mention your country, I don't obviously mention where you're contacting me from, have told me of the need for prayer. So let me just make this a general plea to everybody watching, wherever you are. Pray for our brothers and sisters around the world. You're not hearing all that's going on and I'm not even going to mention the countries, to bring more heat on true believers. But believe me, because I know this personally from people who contact me personally, churches being burned, Christians being slaughtered and killed by other religions and governments and so on. So the church has been persecuted from the very beginning and continues to be persecuted right now. Fearful sights, I'm in verse 11. Fearful sights and great signs from heaven. We talked about that. I gave you Avi Loeb's perspective on making contact with aliens and saying, we better do it quick because it's going to happen quick. And remember, this is not just some, I don't want to say lunatic, but he's not a lunatic. He's a tenured Harvard professor saying, hey, we better get our act together. We're going to have alien contact. And with that, I would say he's right. But these aliens are not actually aliens. We're going to come into contact with the Creator and his angels. You want to call them extraterrestrials? Okay, I suppose they are. But the Creator is not extraterrestrial. He made this planet. And we understand from reading the scriptures that Christ is God, come in the flesh. Right? Another topic, but that's how we read it in the Bible. So, verse 12. They will be delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my namesake, and they shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what ye shall answer. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay, which means to contradict or to resist. Now we see this in the book of Acts, when Stephen, he is the first recorded martyr in the Bible, and he gives a sermon, he gives a message that so enrages the religious authorities of his time that they stoned him. And one of them who consented to it, and was part of it, was the Apostle Paul, who then was named as Saul. These things have happened, and they're still happening. And you shall be betrayed by parents and brethren and kinsfolk and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. One of the greatest surprises that I ever faced in ministry was betrayal. And I'm going to say this in a way that, well, first of all, it's true, but I don't recall ever being betrayed. Let me go back further to my own background. I was taught from a young boy to always be loyal. I come from Irish extraction. My family, they were all Irish. Now, I don't know if all Irishmen are loyal. I don't know. I don't know. I just know that that's what I was taught. If I picked up a young, childhood friend, we're out playing, and if I chose him to, stay with him to play, we used to call it flat lever. You can't just leave him for somebody else. And I think that a lot of my friends, when I look at the fact that a lot of people I know, including myself, have had long-term marriages. I've been with my wife for 50 years. And many of my friends have had long-term marriages. So I don't know if it's just something my generation was taught or something that I was just simply taught by my family. But I was taught to be loyal. And this is it's difficult for me because I'm mature enough and intelligent enough to understand people are not always loyal. I learned many hard lessons of trusting people, being loyal to them, and then when I needed the support, it just wasn't there. These were very hard for me. They were very, very hard lessons to learn, so that when I say now in a kind of a joking way, I say, don't trust anybody. That it is partially a joke, and it is partially true. Give you some scripture on that. In John chapter 4, we read that many believed on Jesus, but he did not believe on them. Now you can read it. I'm paraphrasing it. They believed on him, but he did not believe in them, because he knew what was in man, and he needed not that any should testify of him. It's an interesting verse. They trusted him. He didn't trust them. By the way, that leads me to this thought. You should know, you can trust God. I hope you know that. The question is, can he trust you? Can he entrust to you the things that perhaps he wants to use you for? Or you pray, for understanding. I'll fix my mustache here. You pray for understanding in your Bible. Well, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Just get smarter? Well, we have to be trustworthy as well, or loyal, especially to God. But my advice to you is treat people with a little grain of salt, because I do have people in my life that I know are loyal. Takes one to know one type thing. Others took me by surprise because I was simply uninitiated, and I was not young. I'm in my 50s, and I'm still getting surprises from people who were just mean-spirited, and I don't know. I don't know what to say. I'm almost tempted to say they can't possibly be Christians, but I won't go that far. It's in God's hands, but it just shocked me. In fact, I'm going into a little bit off the subject here. When some things were occurring in my life 20 years ago, I lost so many friends all at once. Well, I said they were friends. Now I know they weren't friends. But I trusted them, and now I know I shouldn't have. But it sent me into a depression. Not locked me away in an institution depression, but I was very depressed, because I just couldn't believe. And what I wanted to say earlier was that when I was in the world, I don't remember that ever happening to me. I'm not saying it wouldn't have, but I just don't remember. Friends were friends. I still feel that way. Then you come into Christianity, and some of you can, especially some of you who say, oh, I've had a bad experience at a church, or I've had a bad experience with a pastor, and I know what you're talking about. We have them in our church, and when they start telling me, or a woman just talked to me at the gas station, whom I didn't know, she recognized me. Oh, you're Pastor Ray. She told me your story. I know what they're talking about, because I've been a subject of that type of abuse myself. So as the kids would say, "Hey, what's that all about?" I don't know. I just know that we're reading here that there would be betrayal within the ranks of the people that, I'll say it this way so you understand it, that we go to church with. You know, David wrote about that in the Psalms. He said if it was an enemy, I could understand, but it was a friend. We went to the house of God together. And I know some of you can identify with what I'm saying. You know, those of you who are really involved in the Lord and Christ, the Bible, you can get betrayed by the very people that you trusted the most. Well, I wish I could help you. I wish I could help myself, but it's just the way it is. And here's the thing. One of the things that Jesus talks about as he's getting closer, and this is something we won't cover today, you would expect, I would expect, that in the times in which we live, with everything that's happening and all the evidence that's there that God wrote this book, that Jesus' return is very close, there's going to be a judgment, heaven or hell, and all that, you would expect that churches would be filling up with people. Truth is, in the churches where the Bible is the main book and it's, you know, all the gospel is taught, the whole counsel of God is taught, people are leaving. And if I didn't know what's written, that before an Antichrist, again, another subject of the return of Christ, before an Antichrist rises up, there would have to be a falling away from the faith, as I mentioned to you, in Western culture, America, England, France, Spain, Germany, the Western nations, Christianity is in the decline. In other countries, Christianity, which, by the way, still is the world's leading religion numbers-wise, is on the increase, which is good. But there would be this betrayal and there would be this falling away from the faith. And we're watching it. I'm watching it. And I'm determined, and I hope that you, first of all, my pastor and preacher, teacher friends, and then all the rest of you as well, stay faithful to Christ, but stay faithful to Christ through the book. And I'm going to say this too in a very general sense. I think we read it here. Let me just see really quick. There's our plumbers at work. When Jesus talked about deception, and he'll talk about false prophets and false teachers. Let me tell you something. And I may be overstating the case, but I don't think that I am. So many of these false prophets and false teachers are on the ones that are on the television are incredibly popular. If you were what I use the term when people ask me, I say I am a biblicist. It means this is my book. I'm a lover of this book. I love this book. It's the only book that, no matter how many times I read it, it fascinates me. And if you are a lover of the Bible and you know what times you're living in, you recognize right away these con artists, as I term them. They're just conning people. I mean, some of them are convinced that what they're teaching is the truth, but when you compare it to the scriptures, it's not. Sometimes it's not only unbiblical, it's anti-biblical. And yet they draw massive crowds. But here's the thing. Read the book of Jeremiah for an example. But you could read almost any book of the Old Testament, as well as the New. But false teachers were always popular because they tell people what people want to hear. You know, to know the truth, you have to be willing to take all the truth in. If you want the truth from your doctor on a diagnosis, well, you have to be prepared for whatever he or she's going to say. You got to be willing to bear the truth. So, you know, we have this betrayal going on. And then in verse 18, I'm in Luke 21 again, if you're just joining us. But there shall not a hair of your head perish. In your patience possess ye your souls. Why do we need patience in the end times? Why did they need it then? Why do we need it now? Well, if living for Christ, and I honestly almost laugh when I hear a preacher talk about, how easy things are, or it's not said that way sometimes, but it's presented like living for Christ is easy. What's wrong with you? I'm having a picnic. Well, first of all, I can tell you, I've been in the camps of some of these people years ago. I don't want to go near them at all now, but they don't live what they preach. A lot of them. I won't say all, but a lot of them don't live what they preach. Many, many contradictions in what they say and what they actually do. Just like the Pharisees. Jesus said, whatever they tell you to do, do it. Just don't do what they do, because they say but they don't do. And then they won't lift a finger to help you in the very things they taught you, which is not, it's not real ministry. These false teachers and these false prophets, they seem like they are just multiplying. I spoke with my wife a few weeks back, and this is my opinion. You can write to me and say, no, you didn't hear of so-and-so. But we just don't have in the Christian world, right at the moment, what I call the voice. I don't mean the voice of God. We have that. Like the days of Billy Graham. There was a voice. I mean, when he was on TV, poof, I heard him speak a lot. I was at a small dinner, 300-400 people small, when he spoke, and it was just astonishing how powerful it was. And then before that, you have Billy Sunday, you have D.L. Moody, you have Charles Finney, you have all these people. But this generation doesn't seem to have that voice, that one representative. And the ones that we've had, the few that we've had, turned out themselves to be phonies. So it can be, I'm on the subject now of patience. In your patience, possess ye your souls. It takes a lot of fortitude to be patient, with our waiting for Christ and deliverance and all that. But it also just takes a lot of focusing on this book and on what it says. I have learned just to, when they put kind of blinders on horses, so they can't be distracted by anything on the left side, the right side. They just look straight ahead. Well, I've always been a rather intense individual, and I have always been able to focus well, but not like I do now. Now it's like just walking like this. And as the saying goes, I don't want to know nothing but this book and what it says, and to study it, and to know Christ through it. So, if you want to read for yourself, I would encourage you to read the rest of Luke chapter 21, then read Matthew 24. You should read chapter 25 as well, where Jesus talks about his servants. 3 parables there. They're all pretty much the same. You had gifts and talents, you never used them, and I want them back, but I want them back with interest. And many people who are interested in eschatology, Bible prophecy of the end times, that profess Christ, don't think much about Matthew 25. How many gifts and talents has God given you? How are you using them? Are you using them for the glory of God? Do you use the social media here for the glory of God? I hope so. Because you could really waste a lot of gray matter and a lot of time, and you waste your whole life on social media. And, every time you get information that sounds true, you gotta vet the whole thing. I mean, that's what I do. I can spend, a good amount of time just trying to see if this is actually true, even when it's coming from a source that I trust. So those are the times we live in, and that's just one of the headaches that we got. Anyway, Matthew 24, read the whole chapter, read the rest of Luke chapter 21, read Mark 13. They're complementary chapters on the subject of the return of Christ. So how close are we? Well, evidently, and again, I'm not naming a date. We are very, very close. Very, very close. Sometimes, don't you, you that are believers, don't you wonder sometimes how much longer can God just put up with this? I mean, me, I'm already done. I'm done with all of the stuff that I have been through in my adult life. Just done. And then you take it, I try to take it from God's perspective. How much longer can God put up with all this evil? There was one famous preacher. I guess he's still famous. And he was asked this question, like, well, what is evil? And he was like, well, who can really describe it? This guy has a doctorate. This guy is, at the time, he was supposed to be one of the leading pastors in America, and you can't define evil, or you just won't define evil. Oh, come on. I mean, this is ridiculous. But we're fulfilling prophecy in it. We have wolves in sheep's clothing. They look like sheep. They talk like sheep. They pretend to be sheep, but they're not sheep. They're wolves. And they will eat your life. If you don't know that book, remember, I say this to you quite frequently, that book was written for you, not for scholars and theologians or just for the pastor. It was written for you, so read it. It will spare you. It will increase your odds of not being deceived, which Jesus talked about. So, I would encourage you to read Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13. Get the comparative statements of the evangelists. Then think to yourself, okay, where am I with Christ? Forget Christianity. Where am I with Christ? Where am I with Jesus? Because in the end, you won't be standing before the pastor. You're not going to be standing before me. You're not going to be standing before the bishop, the pope. You're not going to be standing before any of the leaders. You're going to be standing eye to eye with Christ. And there will be no way to lie. You'll stand before Christ. I want to pray with you today. We're very close. Again, I'm not naming dates, but we're very close. And who knows, what else we could expect to happen in these next few years. The whole world's in turmoil. And that we read today. So, are you truly born again? So I go to church every week. Well, that's good. But are you born again? Have you been born by the Spirit of God? If so, where's the fruit? Where's the evidence? There's always fruit. However you're living, it's easy to see it by behavior, by the way you speak. Now, we can't see how you think, but God can. So, are you born again? Because you must be born again. And that's what a Christian is. And that's where you want to be in any age, but especially in this time. So, let me pray for you. Father, I pray for those who are watching and those that will be watching, that they would have you as their Lord and as their Savior. Help them today to receive you as such and to never be ashamed of that decision before men, before women. To be able to say, well, I'm a Bible-believing Christian. And help us, God, today in this world to be patient until you arrive, until you come. And you return. We see the signs and the evidence. We see it. And it's soon. I mean, how soon? I don't know, but it's soon. Even so, come, Lord Jesus. Well, I'm glad that you were with me. If today was the first time you've actually ever received Christ, why don't you put it in the comments? I want to be honest with you. I don't now or ever have had any ambitions to be, the big shot on the block. I've never had that type of ego where I need a lot of attention, I need a lot of people. And some do, especially if you watch social media alone. I was like, this guy's in love with himself. But it would be good for you to put in the comments, hey, I received Christ today, and we could pray for you. And I don't know how much we could do to help you. It depends on where you're located. Which is, by the way, an invitation to our church. We're in the capital region in upstate New York. If you're in the area, don't have a church, come out to Time for Truth in Amsterdam. And don't forget, we are on YouTube. There's 2 channels here. Well, there's 2 channels on YouTube. You put my name in. There's 2 channels here on Facebook. This one here, what used to be my profile page, is now a public page. And then there's Pastor Ray Barnett. We have another page where we have Bible study tonight, 7 p.m. There'll be a Bible study there with one of our fine teachers that we have from the church. And, well, you can find us on Twitter or X. You can find us on Instagram. We're kind of easy to find. The website has my testimony on it, why I got saved, how I got saved. So there's a lot out there for you, and would appreciate your prayers too, because we have opportunity to go over seas. Now we are on overseas here with the live streaming, but we have last year God opened doors for us to go national with our radio broadcast. Now I have opportunity because someone came forth with some money for us to go overseas. So we got to just find which avenue to go, because we don't have the money to be on all the stations. So we'd appreciate your prayers. Pray for our church. We are in a difficult area, not as difficult as some of you are, that I know. But in the United States, the northeast corner where we are has forever been called the preacher's graveyard. In other words, they send preachers out here who are either ineffective or ready to pass away. God sent me here because with His grace, I don't quit. I'm not giving in. And I hope that that's the attitude that you will adopt for yourself when it comes to serving Christ. All right. God willing, we'll be with you here again next Wednesday. It's around 2-ish now that I've been going on the air on Wednesdays if you want to watch live, but you can watch anytime. And then don't forget Sundays right here, also YouTube at 11 a.m. We're live. And, well, there's a lot more if you just go to the website. God bless. Thanks for being with me. I hope that what I have imparted to you today will help you to walk all the way home with Christ. God bless. See you soon.